I am the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to narrate to you a story I wrote called The Fortune Cookie. Chapter 1. The Office. Just then, in a week? Easy peasy, thought Sean. 大姐, which means elder sister in Chinese, sat across from him, feet up on her giant desk, leaning back deep into the massive leather armchair. 13 years older than him, she was the marketing boss of Wong's Biscuits, the family's confectionery business, while he was still in grad school in Sydney finishing his masters. The eldest child, Jia Ling, had a real chip on her shoulder. When she was born, their mother almost died, and so both mum and dad had raised her as if she was going to be an only child. Since she started to speak, Dad had expected her to take over his empire once he had retired. The biscuit company might be among the top 10 largest in Asia, but was nothing compared to the big Swiss conglomerates which were global market leaders. They might have the appearance of wealth, but not a day passes without Dad reminding both his kids of their humble beginnings. 爷爷, which means grandfather in Chinese, would walk the streets in his white-brimmed straw hat, flogging biscuits to passerbys. They had heard the story only like a million times before, but Dad was simply trying to ignite a fire for achievement in them, the way seeing his father suffer had done for him. Jia Ling was a model student. She did not crumble under the pressure to excel, getting straight A's in school. She even almost won the Maths Olympiad. She wanted to go to medical school, but Dad said no. She was the backup plan should Sean not develop enough backbone to take over the business, and so she was sent to business school in London, followed by an MBA at Harvard. Sean was an accident. Everyone, including Mum, was surprised when she became pregnant. After Jia Ling, they had been careful since childbirth might kill her. However, plans had a way of going awry. Dad wanted an abortion, but Mum refused. She insisted that the baby was God's gift to them and it was not for them to interfere. The best doctors could not save her life. She suffered massive bleeding during labor, but Sean came out crying. She died holding him in her arms. Dad knew it was not Sean's fault, though he could not help blaming the baby. From that point on, Dad threw himself into his work, and Dajie more or less brought Sean up, along with a coterie of servants who doted on them both. Dad brought the company from corner shop to Asia-wide distribution. He expected the next generation to bring Wong's Biscuits across the world. So when Sean told the family that he wanted to study philosophy at university, it almost killed Dad. Plates were smashed and ashtrays were thrown through windows. Sean stormed off, driving his Porsche, Dad's gift for his 18th birthday, into the night. When he returned a week later, things had calmed down. Sean told Dad that he would agree to help at the company if they wished, but Dajie had to be the boss after Dad passed away. She was made for it. She already commanded the respect of everyone, from the factory floor workers to the senior executives. She was smart and capable. She did not have to change. It was Dad's misogynistic attitude that had to go. Sean was right. Dad was a hard boss, but his management style was archaic. Dajie was the opposite. She was the one the workers came to if they fell in hard times and needed a pay advance. If the executives had a bold new idea they feared the old man might not like, it was her that they lobbied. The two of them played a convincing game of good cop bad cop towards their employees, suppliers and customers, and it worked swimmingly. Everyone was happy thanks to Jia Ling, not too happy thanks to the old man, and they all mostly got along. Sean was home for Christmas break. Dajie got Sean to swing by the factory. She herself had just returned from a business trip to Thailand, heading straight from airport to the office. They had not had the chance to reunite yet, while Sean put off coming to headquarters before she got back. Dad wanted him to be put to work so that the senior managers would recognize him when he came in as a member of the board after he graduated. Dajie almost died when she saw Sean. He was wearing a faded t-shirt with jeans torn at the knees. He had dyed his hair yellow and had the most absurd moustache. She burst out laughing, hugging him tightly. They missed each other so much. He was to be her executive assistant for the next month or so, and she was not about to let him get away with doing nothing at his desk. She was her father's daughter after all. Wong's Biscuits recently started a line of premium fortune cookies, and they have been putting within the usual nonsense, like love will find you soon, hard work will be rewarded, be open to new possibilities. The cookies were destined for mid-range Chinese restaurants where they will be served at the end of meals as a small treat to sweeten the blow of the bill. 大姐's work ethic was a simple one. 一不做，二不休. Don't start, but if you do, be sure to do it well. She told Sean about the cookies and the asinine phrases. I want you to figure out 10 phrases which we can put into the cookies so that we can elevate the restaurant's diners, she said. Naturally, Sean proposed to use profound quotes from the philosophers, which was precisely what Jia Ling had in mind. Keep them short, yeah, like a tweet, and not an entire treatise. We need to fit the line into a cookie, she said. Yeah, give me more credit than that, yo. I ain't your 5-year-old baby brother anymore, yeah? He replied. She giggled. You'll always be my baby brother. Before she sent him away, she instructed, Go home now, but come back tomorrow in a suit and tie. Are you trying to kill Dad with this look of yours? Sean guffawed and said as he walked out the door, No man, I'm just being me. You think the whole world revolves around the old man? He waved goodbye. Gosh, he really loved his sister, not so much his father. Chapter 2. Still at the office. Sean did show up properly dressed the next morning. His yellow hair was neatly combed this time, but he was not about to dye it back to black for anyone. 大姐 was already hard at work, poring through the accounts with the finance manager. She saw him through the glass pane separating her office from the junior staff, and waved for him to come in. Good morning, he said, nodding at his sister and then the manager. Recalculate those numbers and then come by in 2 hours, she told Mr. Ho. He replied in the affirmative and then left, closing the door behind him. They hugged. Jia Ling had missed her brother more than anyone in the world. He had in his pocket the 10 phrases ready, handwritten as if computers had not been invented yet. You have all week, you know. You didn't have to write it as you sat on the toilet this morning, she ripped him. In fact, he had spent all night working on the phrases, turning them over and over in his head, researching the books he had and on the web. He was searching for just the quotes he thought would move its readers, eliminating the ones he thought they might not understand. He had a list of at least 50 and arranged and rearranged them until he was finally satisfied. By then the sun had risen. Philosophy was not just something Sean studied or even just a pleasurable pastime. There was not much he was serious about, but he took pride in his cognitive abilities and had come to believe that philosophy might be his life's purpose. He admired his father and sister, but working in an office for the next 30 years seemed like a jail sentence to him. Sean showed her the list. The body and its desires are the only cause of wars, said Plato in the Phaedo. I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man. Zhuangzi. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world, wrote Ludwig Wittgenstein in Tractatus Logico Philosophicus. The only freedom which deserves the name is that of pursuing our own good in our own way, so long as we do not attempt to deprive others of theirs, wrote John Stuart Mill in On Liberty. Treat humanity always as an end and never simply as a means, wrote Immanuel Kant in The Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals. Existence precedes essence, wrote Jean-Paul Sartre in Existentialism is a Humanism. A fool and his money are soon parted, Proverbs 21:20. The history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, said Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto. All things are full of gods, said Thales, as reported by Aristotle in De Anima. I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. This is a Chinese proverb commonly attributed to Confucius. No Descartes' cogito ergo sum or Socrates' an unexamined life is not worth living? No words from Foucault on the all-enveloping nature of power? No Nietzsche's God is dead and we have killed him or Torio's invocation to simplify, asked Jia Ling. Sean started laughing. 大姐 might have been a business major, but she was not unacquainted with the humanities and the social sciences. It was her that got Sean started on philosophy, when she lent him her well-worn volume of Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy when he was 14. They spent many wonderful hours discussing the ideas within it. Sean had guessed then that Dajie had wanted to also pursue philosophy at university, but that bent her to his will, where even medicine was not practical enough for his purpose. In a way, Sean was relieved, since someone could carry on the family business. Dajie was always the sensible kid between the two of them. He was eternally indebted to her. Jia Ling took the big stamp on her table and inked it. She stamped approved on the sheet and handed it back to Sean. "Type it up and send it back to me. Tomorrow we go to print," she said. Chapter 3: The Andromeda Galaxy. The decision to destroy Earth has been approved by the Council subject to the final reconnaissance. Prepare yourself. We will depart for that wretched planet at 0232424338 Universal Time for final reconnaissance. Chief Herzog, spot on planet Xylon of the Andromeda Galaxy and commander of warship S45CSK (NLSN) communicated his instructions telepathically to the crew. The Council had been monitoring the recorded media of all inhabited planets in the universe throughout their histories. At first, there was nothing to monitor in the Milky Way galaxy. Only one planet named Earth had life. Language came late to Earth's primitive creatures, and then only to one of its species, the Homo sapiens. The Council was unanimously impressed with the intellectual achievements of the sapiens, ancient civilizations, ranging back some 2,000 to 6,000 Earth years. They had mixed opinions over the productions of the Middle Ages. Some among them thought that the modern era had the most crucial ideas, with its fantastic works of philosophy and literature. Art had also developed to a high point over all that time, from primitive cave paintings to the finest porcelain and marble sculptures to the most ethereal use of colors and drawings found even on the ceilings of buildings and on canvases. They did not favor the art of the postmodern era as much, puzzled as to what was meant to be conveyed by distorted forms and random splashes of paint. Their experts explained that sapiens had advanced beyond what was external and apparent to try to express what was within themselves. The last few centuries also saw rapid technological advancement, with sapiens even managing to leave terra firma to conquer first the skies and then the near reaches of space. Despite their frequent wars, which had of late gotten bloodier and more devastating, so much so that the Council almost demanded the planet's immediate destruction, they were convinced by some advocates advising the Council to give Earth a chance. But even these advocates were starting to lose confidence, having read for themselves the kind of trash promulgated over a relatively new medium called the Internet. At first, the Internet was all fun and games, mostly used to gawk at depictions of reproductive couplings and anatomy. The medium began to also record the knowledge of the sapiens, forming a kind of permanent collection of their ideas and history. Of late, however, the kind of trash being spewed over what the sapiens called social media led the advocates to lose hope. Short sentences full of poison and hate were delivered at the speed of light across the planet. Brief videos recording the stupidest and most banal actions were watched and apparently enjoyed by millions. Longer videos known as reality shows showcased multitudes of sapiens who seemed delusional. They can't sing, they can't act, and they certainly can't seem to properly carry out that body-shaking called dance, though admittedly the winners occasionally were able to do all three. These forms and older ones called television, newspapers and magazines documented how the most incapable and ruthless individuals were made leaders through popular selection by their people. The planet had gone through terrible phases before, such as the Inquisition and the World Wars, but now the advocates had begun wondering whether it was time to put a stop once and for all to these wretched creatures. The aim of the final reconnaissance was a last-ditch attempt to find if there was anything that gave a sign that sapiens were worth saving. They seemed to have contaminated their environment, harming fellow creatures who dwelt on the same ground. They had poisoned the waters, the skies, and even space. From the media records, their intellects as a whole seemed to have degenerated, and for such creatures, the Council's direction was clear. Clean out the place before they did further harm to the galaxies they inhabited. The Council had learned the lessons themselves the hard way. In year 75359 Universal Time, they had permitted the assets of Space Sector 87 to carry on existing in the expectation that they would self-destruct. Once the assets achieved cosmic exploration technologies, they went on to radioactively contaminate the sector with wars that rendered the space uninhabitable for the next septillion years. Such a fiasco was clearly not to be repeated. The Council's mandate was to ensure the universe as a whole could carry on peacefully with its eye fixed on eternity. However, they were big believers in second chance, sometimes third, sometimes millionth chances. They did not take their elimination actions lightly, which was why they were sending agents on board warship S45CSK:(NLSN) to planet Earth, disguised as sapiens before they made their ultimate decision. Chapter 4 Planet Earth. Herzog found little joy in these final reconnaissance expeditions. With the Council already thoroughly examining the visual, audio and written records originating from the target planets, there was really little left to discover. Nonetheless, the Council had as a rule that a final reconnaissance must be undertaken to ensure that no stones were left unturned. They really did not like to blow up planets, so the missions were a last effort to confirm that the risks to the universe from the continued existence of the planet outweighed the benefits. Once a planet's beings developed the capability for cosmic travel, that was when the risk escalated. Those that never did were allowed to continue on their way since the possibility of planetary contagion were limited. Frequently, this self-imploded under the weight of their own corruption and hubris. Some flourished and became bastions of great civilization. Some, like Earth, had its moments, managed to develop interplanetary travel, but were losing its way by bringing weapons and explosive munitions to space. The main redeeming features of the missions for Herzog was how he could sample the cuisines of the various planets he got to visit and then later destroy. As commander, he had incorporated the enjoyment of a meal with his crew at the Council's expense in the mission execution. Often it was the only event before he gave his recommendation. They were not given much time to evaluate any findings. Just some brief hours in Earth time, and efficiency was the name of his game. Eating often took up all the time. The Council was aware but tolerated this practice. After all, food was one of the sense impressions hard to convey through pictures or video but required actual tasting. The warship entered planetary space at 11:30 Earth time, with light and sound shielding turned on to prevent alarming the planet's inhabitants. The sapiens continued their routines, completely oblivious to the impending destruction of their planet. Those sensitive beings, such as mice and cockroaches, began heading for the coast. Not that that would save them. From the warship, the crew loaded into a landing module to make the final miles onto terra firma. They seemed to have come to a rather busy city and took some time to find a suitable landing spot. Some 5 square meters of land was required, and they finally descended on top of a building. The clock was ticking. After camouflaging their craft and casting human-shaped forms over their bodies, they headed down. The place was bustling with shops selling shiny baubles and appliances among other wares. The store that Navigation Officer Terzik found most fascinating stocked what seemed to be mini versions of what the adults wore for the smaller humans whom the sapiens called kids. They headed for what turned out to be a Chinese restaurant. The Maître D' ushered the group of 4 to a table near the kitchen at the back and proceeded to pour them a hot yellowish liquid called tea, while pushing a book on them which contained photographs of food and words. They observed how some diners were enthusiastically speaking with one another, while some, especially those with mini-humans, were paying more attention to small screens. Herzog took mental note. Even while eating, they were indulging in what the Council considered to be mental pollution, reading toxic tweets and watching vulgar videos. They had done little research prior to coming, and so each just chose one item by pointing on random pages of the menu. The waiter repeated their order. Chicken feet in black bean sauce, fried breaded squid with mayonnaise, sambal kangkong, shark's fin soup. Any rice? Herzog did not know what the hell she wanted and just nodded. Dessert? She clearly saw that Herzog was the boss. To her, they were 4 creeps from abroad here in Singapore for a business meeting. She turned the page for him. He pointed at a picture of a spiky green ellipsoid. It reminded him of the visualization of a polar mathematical equation. "Good choice, very tasty," she said with an exaggerated intonation she reserved for Westerners. She departed, and before long the chicken feet arrived. Terzik found the rubbery texture of the skin rather chewy, which he did not appreciate much given his razor-sharp mastication apparatus. The sauce though was delectable. They shared their scores telepathically. It averaged 53.234%. Not the best and far from what would save the planet. The same waitress came to take the finished dishes away while bringing the squid. She was astonished. Their plates were clean with no remnants. Did they eat the bones too, or put it in their pockets for their dogs, she thought, but politely refrained from asking. The squid was more crunchy, but the appearance was almost too much, reminding them of their distant Quezoghian cousins, which also had 8 appendages. The soup was a mess, with white whiffs of organic material. It was supposed to be a delicacy, but how really could people eat these things? Terzik did a quick search on the universe interweb. To harvest the ingredients, they cut off the fin of the shark and then threw the rest of the mutilated, bleeding shark back into the water to be cannibalized by the other sharks. Barbaric. It fetched a score of negative 20.22%. They enjoyed the rice though with the kangkong vegetables. The fragrance was amazing. It smelled like the tea and tasted like little pellets full of health. Finally, dessert arrived. The trademark dish of the famous Xinjiang restaurant was the durian mousse, which they served in the shell of the actual fruit to show that each was freshly prepared. The smell registered on their olfactory meters as unique and powerful, though they did not blench. It reminded them of their home, which was volcanically active. The tactile sensation on their gastronomic faculties felt light and heavenly. They voted 83.442%. Still not enough. Overall, the meal scored 64.736%. The fact was, other than a unanimous score of perfection, nothing food-wise was going to save the planet. "Enjoy your meal," said the waitress, ceremoniously placing in front of Herzog a plate with 4 fortune cookies wrapped in plastic foil which sat atop the bill. Nodding seemed to work, and the 4 did so vigorously, saying yes thank you in what they assumed was a human inflection, but came out sounding mechanical and flat. The waitress thought, "Germans?" The fortune cookies were a recent innovation at the restaurant. Most authentic Chinese restaurants did not serve such cookies, but the place was popular with Americans who found such gimmicks amusing. Wong Jialing was also persuasive, offering the chain a rather low price, a steal for what was a rather premium cookie. Wong's biscuits were known for their fancy baked goods, which were delectable but expensive. Dovu, the logistics officer, had popped the entire thing into his mouth, but Crinkling, who was in charge of planning, was more circumspect. He read the instructions on the plastic foil and communicated to the rest that the way to deal with the cookie was to crack it open first and examine the contents within. It was supposed to be a fortune, a treasure of some sort. He broke his apart. There was a short text printed on rice paper. The others followed likewise. Dovu put his appendages inside his mouth and removed the paper, which was fast disintegrating. The words came from Plato, Zhuangzi, Marx and Kant. This was the mark of civilization that Herzog was looking for. Surely a people who still record the words of the wise from time past and considered them a treasure could not be all bad. He saw others in the restaurant reading the strips and then popping them into their mouths to eat the edible paper, washing it down with the fragrant tea. Were they trying to become wise by digesting the words? Herzog made up his mind. He would recommend an amnesty for 10 years and then for the council to revisit the planet to decide once more on its continuance. Chapter 5. Back at the office. "Mr. Wong, your cookies were delicious, but you know that the sweets offered for free at the end of the meal are only a teaser, right? They didn't come for the fortunes, but for our food," said Xinjiang, the owner of the eponymous and successful restaurant chain. He was a shrewd negotiator. He liked the idea of the premium cookies but wanted a low price. Wong was a pragmatic businessman. The cookies were an experiment that his daughter dreamt up, and she managed to rope Sean in, which was already profit in itself for him. God knows what in business is the boy learning in his studies. Probably nothing at all, with his head in the clouds. The first batches were not quickly snapped up. Most restaurants did not fancy fortune cookies, finding them tacky, and Xinjiang was right. People did not come to restaurants especially for them, and not all appreciated little grains of wisdom at the end of their meals. "Let me think about it, we will get back to you, thanks for the call," said Wong before putting on the phone. Before the handset could reach the cradle, he already made up his mind. Wong's biscuit would discontinue the product. The profit margin was too slim to warrant the operation. Chapter 6. Now we have reached the end. The council accepted the recommendations of Chief Herzog, scheduling an alternative warship to visit planet Earth in 10 years for another final reconnaissance. Herzog was pleased. That night he dreamt he was a butterfly. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed my little story. To support the Philosophical Bachelor, you can do so at worldwideweb.patreon.com/philosophicalbachelor. To make a one-off contribution, you can do so at gogetfunding.com/philosophicalbachelor. Thank you.